Okay, hi everyone, I guess I can start. So, welcome. My name is Paulina, and today I will talk about Flutter and how to make a beautiful app in an hour. Ta-da. Okay, so a few words about me. As I said, my name is Paulina Szklarska. I currently work as an Android developer at the Droids and Droids company here in Wrocław. I'm also organizer of GDG Wrocław. This is the group that is making this conference for you guys. But I'm not a part of the organizer's crew. You know, all the stuff and all the thank you words should come to those guys in the red t-shirts. So yeah, thank you guys from me. I'm also organizer of Toast Wrocław meetup. This is meetup for Android developers that is based in Wrocław. And I'm involved in Women Tech Makers Wrocław and in many other places. And you can find me, if you'd like to, on Medium, on GitHub, on Twitter, and in many other places, probably. Okay, so as a disclaimer, here are the few things that you need to know about me and the Flutter before we start, so no one will be disappointed. Okay, so first thing, I'm a Flutter hobbyist, okay? I don't work as a Flutter professional developer, I'm an Android developer. And it means that I have really no experience in creating big applications in Flutter. The applications that I made with Flutter were mainly some kind of proof of concepts, for example, or my private projects. And it also means that I have no production experience with Flutter at all. I didn't release any application. And yeah, things that I will show you today are basically the result of my researches for Flutter. And you need to know also that Flutter is still in beta. It's not released yet. So if you're using this, it's kind of YOLO, I guess. And yeah, but Flutter should be released in December. We keep our fingers crossed for this. And however, beside all of those things, I'm still excited about Flutter, and I'd like to share with you a result of my research and, just share with you the things that I discovered about Flutter. Okay, so I guess we can start. Okay, so this is the agenda of the today's speak. Firstly, I will talk about Flutter in general. What is it? How is Flutter different from the solutions that we already have on market? And how to make an application, simple application, how does it work under the hood, and actually the other things that you may think about during the presentation, and I will try to explain them. Okay, and if I will have just a little time at the end, I try to make some live coding demo. Yeah, I thought about this this morning, so it's probably something will break. Okay, so we can start. What is Flutter? So Flutter is basically a framework created by Google team for making mobile applications that are cross-platform. And cross-platform means that we have one single code base, and from this code base we have two different applications for both Android and iOS. And with a single code base, there are benefits, such as we have, for example, just one development, a QA, and project managers team instead of two, for example. So it's a good thing. And in Flutter, we write applications in a Dart. This is a language from a Google team that is stable already. It has a few years, so it's not a new thing. And Dart syntax is very similar to something between Java and Kotlin, I could say. So if you're familiar with one of those, then you probably will have no problems using Dart. Now I'd like to know, just out of my curiosity, how much of you are mobile developers? Okay, so most of the room. And how many of you people are Android developers? Oh, okay, cool. And for example, how many of you is React Native developers? Okay, it's cool. And how many of you have heard before about Flutter? Whoa, okay. And how many of you have used Flutter? Okay, cool. Cool. So we'll just start with the beginnings, with the basics, and then we'll go a little deep further in the Flutter. So yeah, I hope everyone will get something out of this presentation. Okay, so what is so special about Flutter and how Flutter is cool, in my opinion? So first thing is the fast development. So Flutter concept is very similar to the concept of creating web pages. So as in creating web page, for example, you have some HTML file, you can change this, save this, and you will see the changes immediately. And you can achieve something very similar in Flutter using hot reload feature. So hot reload feature is a feature that allows you to rebuild, actually not fully rebuild, but some kind of rebuild application in a few hundred of milliseconds. Yeah, so I've heard recently a sentence that hot reload is like an instant run, but it works. Yeah, so yeah, you can see here that we have some application. This application is a counter, and each time we tap on a button, the counter is incremented, and you will see at this GIF that we have some text tapped. We will just, okay, I guess it should. Oh yeah, so we can tap the button, the counter increments. We have some text tapped. We can change this text to clicked. We can use hot reload, and as you can see, in a 300 milliseconds, the text is changed. Yeah, so just immediately. And this is a cool feature because you can, for example, just sit with your graphic designer, and he can tell you that, you know, just change this color, yeah, or move this 3 pixels, you know, to the left. Someone is smiling, so I guess you've tried this before. Yeah, and as Android developer or mobile developer, you know that it's really problematic. Yeah? Like you're sitting with this graphic designer and you're waiting and, you know, talking about some weather or something like this, waiting for build to finish. Yeah, it's very awkward sometimes. And with Flutter, you can do it very easily. So you can just use Flutter for prototyping. Yeah. And moreover, hot reload allows you to just keep your application state. So as you see in this example, this is a counter that is stored in some variable. And after we change this text and makes hot reload, we see this text change, so the application is rebuilded, but the counter remains the same. Yeah, so it's a cool thing also for debugging, for example. Yeah, cool for me. Okay, the second thing is creating or crafting, as Google described this, a beautiful UI. So when Flutter creators were thinking about Flutter and how to make this framework, they reviewed the list of applications that were awarded for their graphic design, and they got 2 conclusions. So first one is that most of those applications have a very custom UI. There is nothing from native UI, as you can see. Yeah? All the UI controllers are just custom. And the second thing is that those applications are very, very similar on both platforms, on Android and on iOS. So when they were creating Flutter framework, they decided to put a lot of effort into crafting custom UI. So creating custom UI, as you will see later, is very easy in Flutter. So it's a good solution for applications that have custom UI. Yeah, but Flutter is not only about custom UI, it's also about native controllers. So one thing you need to know about Flutter, and I will tell this also a little bit later, is that Flutter doesn't use any native UI at all. So you don't have access to the native controllers, like controllers from Android or iOS SDK. Instead, you use all the widgets from Flutter framework. Yeah, and Flutter creators decided to create whole catalog of UI components that are created for Android developers, for example. So we have full catalog of material design widgets, but also for iOS. So we have full of Cupertino widgets. Do we have some iOS developers here? Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So yeah, Flutter could be also for you. And moreover, what is cool is that you can use those widgets independently from a platform or from a SDK version. So for example, we can have material design on iOS application, and we can have Cupertino widgets on Android device. Yeah. I know that probably not many people will use it, but you can still can. Okay, so how is Flutter different? Because you may think that we already have such solutions on the market, like the most popular one, React Native. How is Flutter different from this? And do we really need something another? Okay, so on the example of React Native application. So we have some application written in a JavaScript, yeah? And below there is a platform, so Android or iOS, yeah? And React Native uses all the native controllers. So when we are using, for example, text in React Native, actually we use text that is from Android or iOS SDK. And yeah, so the application code is written in a JavaScript, and there is a platform code, so we need some kind of bridge between those two. And as JavaScript itself is pretty vast, and the platform code itself is pretty vast, but going through this bridge is not so fast at all. So there might be some performance issues when, for example, when we'd like to, access UI very often, like in animations, for example. So it may be an issue. And all the rendering part is done here. Yeah, so it's not that fast at all. So the Flutter idea was to get rid of this bridge, to remove it completely when it comes to UI. And so they did it. They changed this, and they just move the native widgets to the application side. Yeah, so this is it. This is what I said. In Flutter, we don't really have an access to the native widgets. Actually, we use all the custom widgets that are made by Flutter creators and that are, in a Flutter framework. So because of this, and because of this, rendering part is done on the Flutter side, not on the platform side. And thanks to this, Flutter may be very, very fast, yeah, because it doesn't need to go through this bridge every time when we'd like to access UI, change something on UI or make an animation. So it's cool. And the funny thing is that you can, for example, easily check if an application is written in a Flutter. For example, on Android device, you have this option to enable showing layout bounds. Yeah, so we can see the margins, paddings of the application, yeah, and so on. And if you will enable this and will see the application, Flutter application, you will see that there are actually no layouts, yeah, according to the Android device. So you can easily just check that this is a Flutter application because according to the Android, it has no UI at all. And it's because it's all rendered on the Flutter side. Okay, so Flutter, as I said, is fast, and I mean really fast, like 60 FPS fast. And even can be even 120 FPS on the devices that support this. Actually, we shouldn't. I mean, probably we will not use 120 FPS. 60 is enough, but it's also a good result. And Flutter is also flexible because of widgets and because of concept that everything is a widget. And by everything, I mean literally everything. So as you can see, there's a sample of application, and the widget in this example is a scaffold. A scaffold is just the whole window of the application. A scaffold has some parameters like an up bar or floating action button, yeah, and so on. So the whole application is just widget. And also we have widgets for such a common things like the buttons, but the widgets are also views, like view groups, for example, row. That is like linear layout, for example. And widgets are also for alignment, like center, for making paddings or markings, like this one, and many, many more. So actually everything is a widget, including gestures. For example, if we want to add some gesture control, we need to add just a widget called gesture detector. If we like to add some animation, we need to add widget for this. So basically everything is a widget. And because of this, and because of concept that composition is over inheritance in Flutter, we are allowed to create UI in a very flexible way, which I will show a little bit later. There are just a few more slides like this, and I will go to the code. Just okay. And as I said, everything is written in a Dart. It's not native, but still we have some native look and feel of the application. So all the guidelines are, are implemented, all the widgets are implemented according to the guidelines. And the differences between platforms, such as overscroll behavior or some scroll animations that are different on iOS and Android, they're also implemented. Okay, and what is cool about Flutter and what I like the most is that this is the application called Flutter Gallery. It is an application working as a showcase for Flutter widgets. So we can run the application and see Flutter possibilities. And this application was run on Android 7.1.1 version. Yeah, so it looks cool, but it's a new device, so nothing special. But this is also the Flutter Gallery application that is run on Android 4.4.4. Yeah, you see, this is an Android that is from 2030. That is like 5 years ago. Yeah, and it's the 1 year before even material design was released. Yeah, and it has material design animations. Yeah, and so on. So it's like it really blows my mind completely. So you are independent from an Android version, from a platform. The same application that you will write once, it will look just the same on an old Android, on new Android, on iOS. Yeah, so we can just do amazing stuff with Flutter. Okay, so who uses Flutter? Because behind React Native, we have some big companies like Facebook, yeah, like Slack, like Airbnb used to. And yeah, behind the Flutter, to be honest, there are really no big companies at all at this moment. So Google uses this internally for applications such as Google Ads, for example. And some big companies try to implement Flutter. For example, Alibaba for its Android application that has over 50 million users. So it is working, it can be done. It's just Flutter needs some time to get trust from companies. Okay, so how to make an application? And it's the coding part. Some kind of coding, slide coding. Okay, so as I said previously, like everything is a widget. And as we start making an application, we need to create widget. So my app, as you know, in every example, my first application, yeah. So my app is a widget. To run application, we need to create widget. To create widget, we need to extend stateless or stateful widget class. This is just a concept that is very, very similar to the React Native. And for now, all you need to know is that it's just a widget without a state. So without information that will change. And this stateless widget has only one method to override. It's build. So it's basically for creating a layout hierarchy. So we don't have any XML file. We don't have any storyboards. iOS developer can correct me, something like this. So to create a UI, we need to, just sit to the code. And first widget is material app. So material app is really just an application. So the title is not title that will show in a toolbar, for example. It's just the title of application. And the scaffold is a application window, as I showed you previously. So it's all that it takes just to show the application. And it will have, the white background, so it's not a big deal. But it's just, as you see, those 10 lines or something like this, it's all to create the simplest application. Okay, but, white window is not enough for us. We'd like to create something more complicated. In this example, we'll create the chat messages list. So we like to add some toolbar, for example. So we can do it. We can do it using the property of a scaffold called appbar. And to create appbar, we need to use appbar widget with a title, and we'll say that this title should be a text. And ta-da, we have a toolbar. Yeah. So as you can see, there is no need to passing parameters such as width or height or background color or text color or anything else. It's just we need to write the things that really are required, the things that matter for us, and everything else is handled by us, for us by Flutter. Okay, so now we'll add just the list itself. We'll do it as a body. Body is something that is between appbar and the bottom of the application, and we'll create another widget so we will not have, the arrow in the code. As you see, this is the beginning, just, Okay, so we'll create another widget. Widget that will have a column. Column is just like a linear layout that is vertically. And inside this, we'll have the widget called flexible. So it's all for making our list as big as the screen. Yeah, so we'll just tell that it should have the amount of space that it's left. So every space that is on the screen. And inside, we can put just the list view builder. One moment, I'm losing my voice. Okay, so list view builder. If you're an Android developer, so you probably think about list view builder as a recycler view with adapter. So here we can describe how many items do we like to have, and how the single items should look like. And if you're an Android developer, then you know probably how much space would it take to write the recycler view with layout manager, with adapter. Yeah, it will be something like, I don't know, 30 lines of code, something like this. And you can achieve the same result using Flutter with 1, 2, 3, something like 4, 5 lines of code. Yeah. Okay, so we'll now go to the building the list item. To build the list item, we'll use the ready component called list style. And you need to know that there are many, many widgets that are ready to use in Flutter, so you don't have to write this on your own. You can use just some existing one if you would like to have some native UI. And this last list style will have the leading. There is something that is on the left, and we'll use some icon. And as you see, I used icons done. And we can do it because in Flutter we have access to many, many resources that we can use. For example, icons or colors from material palette. Yes, so we don't have to, make exports for simple graphic design such as icons. We don't have to, Google for material palette colors or something like this. We can use just things from Flutter. Okay, and it's all it takes to get such a screen. Yeah, it's still no very spectacular, but it's something. Now we'll go to the adding more things, such as title, for example. We have some title, then we have some subtitle, and a subtitle. And as you see, I'm just skipping slides, so it's pretty fast. But you can believe me that hot reload works as fast as skipping those slides. So whenever I would like to change something, for example, icon or add some text or anything, and I tap hot reload, I will see those changes like immediately. Yeah, so I can use it for prototyping very efficiently. Okay, for example, I can use some ready component like circle avatar to wrap this icon into a circle. And I will add some checkbox, for example, because why not? and I have some checkbox. Okay, so this, I don't know, it was like 60 lines of code. It's all for making such a screen. Now, you can visualize how much code in Android you will need to write, or iOS probably, I'm not sure. Yeah, and you can, just think about this. And okay, because I like material design, so I'll put everything in a card view. Ta-da! And I would like to add some padding, because why not? So I will add some padding. Yeah, as you saw, everything is a widget, yeah, including padding. What was, a little bit weird for me, but that's Flutter. Okay, and now, because I'm a girl, so I like colors also, and I like to change the colors of the application. So I will add theme data. And in theme data, it describes some of the material colors, for example, a primary swatch or accent color. So as you see, I changed the accent color for a pink, and now all the checkboxes are pink. And I can change, for example, the whole colors of the application to purple. So now whole application is purple. Cool. And this application is made on an Android device or Android emulator. But if I will run this on an iOS, it's called simulator, yeah, iOS simulator, I will just see the exact result, yeah, with just a single code base. So I wrote everything once, yeah, and I have 2 applications. But I know that probably App Store wouldn't publish my application with material design in iOS device. So with just few changes of code, like I changed few lines, and I get the quite semi-native iOS look. Yeah, so it's very easy to use material design or iOS or Cupertino widgets, simultaneously. Okay, what about testing? So in Android, if we would like to test our UI, we need some device, yeah, emulated one or a real one, but we need the device. We can of course use something like Roboto or anything that is emulated, but it's still just a real one environment, yeah. So in Flutter is a little bit different. So in Flutter we have a few possibilities. One possibility to test widget is to use something called widget tester. So we basically just emulate the Flutter environment, and we run those tests such as unit tests. Yeah. So as in this example, we'd like to test our application that it has all the list items. So we can pump widget. It's just basically loading widget. We can check that we have one widget of type list view, one widget of with text title number 0, and we can make some drag. And this can be constant because we have emulated environment that is independent from a device, and we actually don't need to run those tests on a device. We can, we don't need really a device for running those tests. And we can check that after this, we have one widget with text title number 9. Yeah. So we can test things like UI very, very fast. And we can test independently from Android SDK, for example, or just platform. Yeah, so we have very predictable test result. Okay, so how Flutter works under the hood. So below all of this is a Flutter Engine written in C++. And it consists of Skia. This is a 2D graphical engine, the same that is used actually on Android or on Chromium, for example. And we have also Dart for some virtual machine management stuff, and text for some text rendering. 1 second. It's just the air conditioning. Okay, and okay, I see. And above we have a framework itself, Dart. And as you can see, the framework is created using layer cake. Yeah, it's such a layer cake. So every layer above uses some things from a layer below. So from this foundation, animation, rendering, and so on, There are build widgets, and from widgets there are made Cupertino widgets, and from those there are made material widgets. So I think now it's worse. Just stop this, don't touch this. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. But you made people laugh, they know that sleep is cool. Okay, so the result of the Flutter building process is an IPK or IPA file. So it's just like, in a native development. And everything is compiled into the APK, including Flutter Engine, the same that I mentioned before, the Android application written in Java in Kotlin. So you can, implement some kind of native things into the Flutter application. I will show this a little bit later. And also the Flutter SDK with your code. So in the simplest approach, in the simplest example, when we have some application with only one widget that is center, the application should be at least 4.7 megabytes. So it may be a big issue if you're making instant application, because it has some limitations due to application weight. But in the other case, it shouldn't be a really big problem for you. And the same comes for iOS. So we have an APA file, and we have just the same Flutter Engine, iOS application, written in Objective-C or Swift, and SDK with your application code. That's, in a general. Okay, so cool. I told you about some of the things. You probably have some thoughts on your mind. And okay, so what about, for example, custom UI? Yeah, how hard is it to implement custom UI in Flutter? So it's not that hard at all. You can have two approaches. You have two approaches. So first one is to just extend the custom. Excuse me. You can just extend the existing widget. For example, if you'd like to create the button with the rectangle border, we can use the existing button called flat button, and we can just use one of those parameters, such as shape, to just change shape. So every widget has a wide spectrum of parameters that you can override and change. So you have full possibility to change this those widgets. But in some cases, it may be not enough. So for example, if you would like to create such a screen with a timer, you have the second approach, very similar to designing in native Android applications, for example. So you can just draw on a canvas. So you have canvas, you have access to canvas. You can just use paint, or you can draw circle and draw arc, and so on. So it's like the same as an Android. Okay, now what about libraries? Because native solutions have a really big support when it comes to libraries. We have many solutions, for example, for networking, for database, for such a common things. And what about Flutter? So in Flutter, we have something called .packages. This is a catalog of just Flutter libraries, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Now it's almost 800 of packages, and we have packages for such a common things, such as, for example, handling preferences, or Google sign-in, or Firebase, or anything like this. I'm sorry. And what is cool about those libraries is that they are all ranked based on their maintenance, on their health, on their popularity. So every library has those kind of scoring, and you can check if the application is under the maintenance, or it's deprecated, or something like this. And on the most of those applications, the author is Flutter team. So the guys from Google, from a Flutter team, they are working very hard on those libraries. So they are good. Okay, what about camera? What about Bluetooth? What about background jobs? Something that is very specific to the platform. So in Flutter, we have possibility to use native code. Of course, we cannot do this in a Flutter directly, because in Flutter we don't have really access to those platform things. We need to use something called method channel. And method channel is actually a channel between your Flutter application and your native iOS or Android application working as a host. So it works like this. You have some code implemented in an Android activity. This is an example of the activity written in a Kotlin, and you can just set some method call handler. This is just a callback from Flutter application. And for example, we will just get the battery level on the device, on Android device. So we can just get the battery level. We can call the result that is success or error or not implemented. Yeah, we can just send this back to the Flutter application. And on the Flutter app, we can just get this result. And after all of this, we know what battery level is. So we have possibility to write something in the code, in the native application. And actually, most of those third packages, they are working just like this. So this is a code that has been written by the people to Android and iOS platforms. Yeah, and we can use it for a common things such, for example, preferences or getting device info. Oh, this is, sorry about this. Okay, what about Flutter limitations? Because Flutter is not a miracle. It has some limitations. So at this moment, you actually cannot use native UI components, and it will probably not change because that's the idea of the Flutter. But you cannot use components such as Google Maps, for example. So you have possibility to use maps in a Flutter application, but you need to do it using method channels, as I showed previously. So if your application is somehow based on maps, then Flutter may not be the best solution for you. There's also no web equivalent in a Flutter. So when you're using React Native, you have the React, so some of the code can be shared between web and mobile. In Flutter, it's currently not possible. Also, there is no support for 3D. Skia is 2D engine, so every work, including 3D graphic, actually now Flutter doesn't support this. And it's ARM only, so Flutter cannot be run on devices with x86 processors. It can be emulated in somehow, but in a release application, it cannot be used. So ARM and ARM64 only applications. And it's, x86 is just like, I don't know, 1.5% of the devices, so it's not big number, but it's still, thousands probably of, hundreds of thousands of Android devices, so it's an issue for Flutter developers. And as I showed previously, the minimum weight of the application is 4.7 megabytes. So if your application is an instant app, then Flutter may be not the best solution for you. Okay, and cool, but now we'll stop. I know that I didn't cover all the topics around Flutter, and probably there are some more questions, but there is no time for this. If you're just a little bit curious about Flutter, I encourage you to visit, for example, Google Code Labs. These are the code labs. There are many of them for Flutter, and by many I mean like 6. And one of them is for creating UI. Second one is for creating integration with Firebase. So if you're curious how integration with some kind of logic is done in a Flutter, you can just use those code labs. And to summarize, so Flutter, in my opinion, is cool. You cannot argue with my opinion. And Flutter is very fast, and both in development because of the hot reload feature, but also as an application itself. 60 FPS, as you saw on the animations, it's quite amazing. Flutter is super fun. Just the community is super fun, very helpful, and Flutter is something new, so it's always super fun to try new things. Flutter is easy to start, both setup and using, and Flutter is just beautiful. Okay, if you would like to, this is my some sample on a GitHub. very similar to this application, but with Firebase. This is a technical overview for Flutter if you'd like to, get more into. If you're encouraged and you would like to more know about Flutter, for example, how keeping state is done, then it's a great talk from Brian Egan, who is really good at Flutter. And this is my article about 5 reasons why you may love it. If you're not, really encouraged, then you can maybe read this. And yeah, thanks. Questions?
Hello, thank you for your very technical and nice talks. I have 3 questions.
Okay.
First, how about business logic? I see that you said that in Flutter everything is widget. First widget is my application widget. So where I put my business logic in this widget or in some other place?
So this may be confusing. It's a very common question. Like people ask me, okay, cool about the UI, but what about the logic? So the answer is Flutter is a reactive framework, such as React Native. So all the common architectures that we know from Android, for example, MVP, MVC, or MVVM, MV something, they don't work with Flutter. So with Flutter, of course, we have possibility to write business logic, and we have architectures like Redux, for example, that are very good, because in Flutter it's all about widgets, and widgets are all about state. I didn't show you this because in this example there is not so much data, but basically, if you're not going to keep your state in a widget because it's a bad design idea. You can have your state in some other place. And Redux is an architecture that allows you to have some kind of stores that store your state. So you will have just the state in one place, and you can just build your logic in this one place. So you can have, for example, different layers there of the design. You can have unit tests for this, and you can have widgets in the other place. So the widgets only have access to the data that they need, but actually all the data is stored just somewhere. I encourage you just to look at this keep it simple state talk. Brian talks about keeping state and how it can be separated in a Flutter.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Second question is about your example with iOS app. Because you say it's the same code base, so how you handled change widget for iOS, for example? You have very ugly if Android this widget, if iOS second widget?
It sounds funny, but that's the thing. Yeah, actually, you can, the simplest thing is not stupid if it works. You can have, of course, ifs. There is if target platform Android, if target platform iOS. And you can make some kind of abstraction over it. So I saw the approaches when guys made some kind of, generic widget, for example. So you have this logic, below, under the hood. So you don't see this actually in the code. But yeah, it's all about, making if. I know that there are a few ideas to make this so you will not see this. So you will have just the toolbar, for example, and when it's Android, it will automatically just add the up bar, the toolbar, and when it's iOS, it will add the up bar. But for now, you need to write ifs.
Okay, thank you. And last, my question is about support. You write in Android Studio, yeah?
Yeah. Actually, I don't have time. I will just. Yeah. Emulator. Why are you doing this? Okay, so I will not show you the emulator because it made some weird thing. But yeah, actually you can use Android Studio or IntelliJ IDEA or Visual Studio Code. I haven't tried the third one, but Android Studio itself or IntelliJ is pretty good. And yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, you don't see this. Okay. Can you
One quick question. How
Sorry
do you
about this.
how is support of the documentation?
Okay, thank you. Support of the documentation.
Yeah, how well
when
is
is the microphone?
Yeah,
Where?
there.
Ah, okay.
So how do you find about all those parameters like up bar title that has title or body? Because it's like kind of unknown from what I see.
Yeah, so the problem, in my opinion, because the documentation is done and is full and it's maintenance, but to me it's very unreadable. Yeah, so the application, the documentation, it's you can read about all of those things, all of those parameters. So you have them, but you need to like read a lot of text without the images, without the examples. So I think it's a good space to improvement. But yeah, you can just documentation is good, just to see those things.
So I think it's lunchtime. So
There was
Thank you,
last one
Paulina.
question. Can
okay,
we-
okay. If you
Last
want.
one.
Last question. I would like to ask about translations. If you really have to code everything here with hard coding strings, how do you provide translations? Do you have to do it platform specific or write something by yourself?
No, actually there is a ready package for this. So the usage is very similar to Android. So you have your strings stored in one place. It's not the XML file. It's just the file, text file, and you have them in one place, and you just declare the languages. And in the application, you are using them as a store. Yeah, so it's very similar as in Android.
Thanks.
Okay, that's all, I guess. Yeah, lunch and something like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you.